Unit 2, Lesson 5 is all about properties. The nice thing about properties and numbers is that we can use them to help add or subtract or find the answer to a problem a little bit easier. Allows us to be flexible with how we solve things. There are 4 main properties that I want you to know, and I'm pretty sure that you know 3 of these 4. The 4th one may be new for you. But there's the commutative property, associative property, identity property, and the distributive property. These are some of my favorite things to learn because they're kind of fun to talk about. Commutative property means that you can add numbers in any order and multiply numbers in any order. Notice it works for only addition and multiplication. And the way I think about this is that, you commute to work, or you may know someone that commutes to work, and that just means that they move back and forth. So in commutative property, the order doesn't matter. All right, associative property. Associative property, you think about who you associate with. Associate means to be friends with. So I don't know about you, but I remember being in middle school, and one day I'd be best friends with this person, and then the next day I would get in a fight for some reason, who knows, and we wouldn't be talking to each other. And then the next day we'd be back to being friends. Well, associative property is kind of like that too. It just means that you can group the numbers together in any combination as long as the only operations you have are addition or multiplying. Kind of the same as up here with commutative property. But here you'll notice that the associative property has parentheses. Those parentheses are the associates. They're the friends. So 4 and 5 are friends today, and 1, he got kicked out of the club. He wasn't being nice, so they're like, I don't want to hang out with you. So 4 and 5 are the friends, 1 is not. But something happened, and 4 got kicked out of the club too. So 5 and 1 are now friends, 4 is out of the club. He did something mean. I don't know what 4 did. Maybe, it's like Mean Girls. He didn't wear pink on the right day. But anyway, it doesn't matter which grouping you have, as long as the addition signs are all the same here. So it's only addition, and here's only multiplication. Notice the order of the numbers didn't change. 926, 926, 451, 451. The only thing is those parentheses changed, the associates changed, and that's associative property. Identity property is pretty self-explanatory if you think about that word identity. It's just saying that you keep your number the same. And when we're talking about addition and multiplication, there's really only one type of identity number. When we're talking about addition, the only number you can add to something and keep it that same number is 0. 0 is the identity number. And it says, hey, you know what? 4 plus 0, it's still 4. It's like maybe I changed the hair color today. I'm still me. 4 plus 0 is 4. Now the identity number for multiplication is a little different because 8 times 0 would be 0, and that changes the identity. But 8 times 1 is 8, and it stays the same number. So the identity numbers are 0 and 1, but examples like this where you're adding 0 or multiplying by 1 represent the identity property. Last up is the distributive property, and this is one of my very favorite ones, and I wish I could show you in a video of me doing this demonstration what it means. But the distributive property, I think of the claw. Any of you Disney fanatics, you know that that is from Toy Story. And I think of the little green guys standing in that, claw machine, and they look up and they say, the claw! Well, it's kind of the same thing here with the numbers. Distributive property means you need to give whatever numbers on the outside of the parentheses to every number on the inside. And when you'll notice here, I have parentheses, just like I did in the associative property. But the difference is I've got a number hugging those parentheses. In other words, I'm multiplying by 6. To do the distributive property, we draw our claw. See, there's the claw. I told you Mrs. Bank is not a good artist. But we do, the 6 is the claw, and it goes in and grabs the 9. It spits out the plus sign because it doesn't want it, goes back in and grabs the 14. Then you do the math for those numbers and you get your answer. So those are the 4 types of main properties that I want you to be familiar with. Next up, for example 1, we're just trying to tell and identify what property is being used. So I have 4 times the quantity of 4 times 2 equals 4 times 4 all multiplied by 2. First things first, I notice that I have parentheses, and if I remember back up to my top 4 properties, there really are 2 properties that boast those parentheses. The first one is the associative property, and the second one is the distributive property. And my job is to figure out which one is which. The other thing I notice is that 4, 4, 2, 4, 4, 2, my orders didn't change, so it's not commutative property. I'm not multiplying by 1 or adding by 0, so it's not identity property, so I'm still back to my associative or distributive. Now, I am multiplying. That number that's on the outside is multiplying, so that's kind of a sign of distributive property. But the difference here is that I have multiplication on the inside of my parentheses. So this is an example of the associative property. Here, 4 and 2 are friends, 4 got kicked out, 4 and 4 are friends, 2 got kicked out. But the parentheses just change what you multiply first. So since I have parentheses and both of my operations are the same, they're in the same order, it's just that one person got kicked out, then that represents the associative property. All right, let's practice using some of those properties we just talked about to get some flexibility in how we're going to solve the problem. If I look at 4 times the quantity of 25 times 9, if I followed order of operations as I should, I need to do 25 times 9 first. But I don't know about you, I don't want to do that in my head. So I'm going to look for a different way that I can solve this problem. First of all, I notice that both operations are multiplication, and I've got my trademark parentheses, so that means that I could probably use that associative property. Instead of doing 25 times 9 first, I'm going to focus on 4 times 25. So these two are my friends, and 9 is on the outside. And I'm going to justify it by writing down the associative property. That's what I used. Then I can do my 4 times 25, which is 100, and 100 times 9 is 900. Done. Next up is distributive property. When we're dealing with distributive property like this, when it's a number times another number and there are no variables in it, like we'll deal with later on, I just think of the distributive property as an easy way to do mental math. I'm going to look at that 19 number and see what friendly numbers I can break it up into. I could rewrite this as 2 times the quantity of 10 plus 9, because multiplying by 10 is pretty easy, and then multiplying by 9, especially when I'm multiplying by 2, isn't too difficult. And 10 plus 9 still gives me that 19. However, I want to think of it as, 19 is really close to 20. So I'm going to write it as 2 times the quantity of 20, but I still need 19. So to go from 20 to 19, I'm going to subtract 1. Now I'm using that distributive property. So in my mind, this is what I'm doing in my mind. I'm not, necessarily always writing this down on paper, but this is how I multiply really quick in my head. I go ahead and do 2 times 20, which gives me 40. And then I know that I'm going to be subtracting, because that's the sign in the middle. 2 times 1 is 2. So my distributive property part would be 2 times 20 minus 2 times 1. That's actual what you should be writing down. And then 40 minus 2 is 38. Now, of course, you can just do 2 times 19 on paper, but sometimes that's not as quick when you get pretty fast at doing the distributive property in your head and breaking apart those numbers. All right, on the last problem, we have an error analysis. And here we have a student that did 6 times 9 plus 12 a certain way, and we need to figure out what their error was. If I notice here, I have parentheses, and I have addition and multiplication. Because of the parentheses, I need to be thinking distributive or associative. But because these two operations are not the same, that means that I'm distributing. Distributive is where I'm multiplying to both of the numbers inside of my parentheses, and those numbers are either separated by an addition sign or subtraction. Let's go ahead and do our distributive. So that would be 6 times 9 plus 6 times 12. I have to multiply 6 by both of those terms. 6 times 9 is 54, plus 6 times 12 is 72, which gives me a total of 126. The error that the student made, I want you to figure it out. That's going to be part of your question. All right, and I will wrap that up for today, and tomorrow we'll get into our decimal operations.